Have you ever looked at the Chinese tech scene and just felt completely overwhelmed? I mean, there are countless apps, new services popping up all the time. It just looks like chaos. But what if I told you there's a hidden order to all of it? A simple key that unlocks the entire thing. All right, let's get into it. So here's how we're going to break it all down in this explainer. First, we'll talk about the illusion of choice. Then we'll get into the real story, a war of ecosystems. We'll meet the original giants, the titans, and the new kids on the block. And I'll leave you with one simple framework that'll help you make sense of it all from now on.
All right, let's start with that feeling of being overwhelmed. Because, the number of apps and services in China, it can make your head spin.
It's a totally fair question, right? You've got apps for messaging, for shopping, payments, videos, you name it, there's an app for it. On the surface, it looks like a super competitive market with a ton of variety. But is it really? Okay, check out this list of the top apps in China. At first glance, it looks pretty diverse, lots of different names. But now, look at that third column, the one labeled ecosystem. All of a sudden, a hidden pattern just snaps into focus. Look at that. Tencent owns 4 of the top 10. Alibaba's got 2. Baidu also has 2. Suddenly, that illusion of endless choice just shatters. You're not really choosing between a dozen different companies. Most of the time, you're just choosing between 2 or 3 giants. And that brings us to the single most important concept for understanding all of this. The Chinese tech scene isn't some chaotic free-for-all. It's a war of ecosystems. And it's mostly being fought between 2 giants, Alibaba and Tencent. For years, everyone talked about the industry using the acronym BATS. That's Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. But this isn't just about 3 big companies. It's really about their strategy of building these massive, sprawling corporate families by investing in or buying up tons of smaller companies. And this strategy has created what you can only really call a proxy war. What happens is a hot new startup comes along, and almost immediately it gets a ton of funding from or is just bought outright by either Alibaba or Tencent. And just like that little startup becomes a soldier sent to the front lines to fight the other giant's army of companies. And if you want to understand the sheer mind-blowing scale of these proxy wars, just get a load of this number. Back in 2014, in the battle for taxi apps, the Tencent-backed Didi and the Alibaba-backed Kuaidi spent 2 billion yuan. That's over $300 million just on coupons. They burned so much cash that for a while people were taking taxis for free just to go to the grocery store. That is the kind of insane firepower these ecosystems bring to the table. And this isn't some old history lesson. This proxy war is happening right now, today. Just look at the modern battlefield of new retail. On one side, you have Alibaba's army, their Hema Fresh supermarkets, their legendary e-commerce platform Taobao, and the food delivery service LMA. But Tencent has its own troops. It's backing Yonghui Superstores, the e-commerce giant JD.com, and the everything app, Meituan. It's literally 2 complete competing armies fighting for every dollar you spend. So to really understand this war, you gotta know the generals. Let's do a quick profile on each of the original BAT companies. First up, the A in BAT, Alibaba, the empire Jack Ma built. Everything they do is built around one thing, commerce. Of course, its foundation is e-commerce, with Taobao and Tmall. And its real power comes from the tech underneath it all. AliCloud, which is a monster in cloud computing, and Alipay, the payment system that's just everywhere. But, and this is a huge but, it has a massive Achilles heel. Alibaba has never, ever been able to crack social media. They actually tried to add a social feature to Alipay once, and it was such a disaster it barely lasted 3 days. They've been scared to try again ever since. All right, now for the T, Tencent. Founded by Pony Ma, this company's DNA is all about social connection and entertainment. So Tencent's core is social media, built on WeChat and QQ. Its biggest strength by far is WeChat's social graph, which is basically the operating system for daily life in China. Oh, and it's also the biggest gaming company in the entire world. But here's the funny part. It has the exact opposite problem that Alibaba has. For all its social power, Tencent doesn't have its own major e-commerce platform. They tried, it failed, and now they have to rely on their investments, like in JD.com, to fight that war for them. And finally, the B, Baidu, China's original search engine giant, which is now betting its entire future on a massive pivot into new tech. Now, its core has always been search, but its real strength today is its deep R&D in artificial intelligence, especially its Apollo platform for self-driving cars. The weakness, though, is a big one. The old search advertising business is getting eaten alive by newer, smarter apps. And those huge bets on AI and autonomous driving, well, they aren't making any money yet. So that's left Baidu in a pretty tough spot. And that tough spot, that vulnerability, has created an opening for some new contenders. See, the game is changing, and that old BAT acronym, it really isn't enough to describe the scene anymore. The whole conversation is shifting. Now people talk about BAT, BTB, adding ByteDance to the mix. Or you'll hear BATH for Huawei, or BATX for Xiaomi, or BATJ for JD.com. It just goes to show you how much the top tier of Chinese tech is in flux. So who are these disruptors crashing the party? Well, first you've got ByteDance, the absolute masters of the recommendation engine. With apps like TikTok and Toutiao, they basically just walked in and stole the entire online ad market right from under Baidu's nose. Then there's JD.com, Tencent's main partner in retail and a logistics monster in its own right. Think of Xiaomi as like a digital Muji. They make beautifully designed, low-cost hardware for pretty much every part of your house. And of course, there's Huawei, the telecom and R&D powerhouse that just keeps pushing forward no matter the international pressure. Okay, so we've seen the illusion, we get the proxy war, we've met the players, both old and new. How do we pull all this together into a tool that you can actually use? Here's the most important takeaway. For almost any startup in China, the road to getting huge eventually leads to a fork in the road. They have to make a choice. Are you going to join Team Alibaba, or are you going to join Team Tencent? That decision ends up defining everything: their strategy, who their friends are, and who their enemies are. And that right there gives you a super powerful but really simple framework. The next time you hear about some exciting new Chinese tech company that's blowing up, the very first question you should ask yourself isn't what do they do? No, the first question is, which ecosystem does it belong to? Answering that one question will tell you more about its chances and its future than almost anything else. Because in the end, if you really want to understand a new player in this market, you have to know what game they're playing. And that game is a war of ecosystems. So the first and most important question is always, whose side are they on?